All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hi, Rabbi. How are you?
I'm good, Pastor. How are you?
Doing great. I'm so excited this evening because we have a guest with us, and he's a great friend of ours. And he is going to visit with my diversity circle. We have with us this afternoon Derek Barber King Sr. And Derek happens to be a family member of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I understand that Dr. King's brother was Reverend Dr. Alfred Daniel Williams King Sr., and that our guest today is one of three boys born to that union with Mrs. Naomi Ruth Barber King. Welcome, Dr. King. How are you?
Wonderful, Pastor.
Glad to have you. All the way from Atlanta, Georgia, right?
The ATL.
I always love the ATL along with the STL. It's like our competing cities.
That'll work. That'll
Yeah.
work.
And just to add a little bit, I just want to say that you are a fourth generation preacher, and you were licensed and ordained a minister of the Christian gospel at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And you've served in many locations, but also that you served as an instructor and retired in May of 2018 after 19 years as a full-time associate professor of religious studies at Martin University in Indianapolis, Indiana, and that you have gone on to teach in many extension programs and in many public school systems. So thank you for your service as an educator, as well as obviously a man of God. I am so looking forward to our conversation.
I'm just a servant.
I am
Really
sure you are
exciting.
much more than a servant.
Well,
It's truly exciting. Yeah.
thank God for the rumors.
So you were in Indianapolis for a while. You're back in Atlanta with the core group of the family there. And what's it like there during this election period? Can you give us just a comment or two?
Well, Atlanta, not only Atlanta, but the state of Georgia came into, I guess, the national spotlight a little over 2 years ago with the efforts of Stacey Abrams to become Georgia's first Black governor, female governor, and a word that has been bantered about to some large extent after her attempt, this whole idea, this whole reality of voter suppression. So,
yeah.
So Stacey decided to take on the task of trying to eliminate the efforts of people who want to suppress votes. So we are, as in many of the, as they say, battleground states who didn't favor the president and voted in rather large numbers to voice our displeasure with his service and what is happening in Georgia. We are on the verge of the recount of the vote, and
wow,
those persons into the millions who didn't favor the president. I am one of those who wants the whole thing to get over and let the country move on. So,
yeah.
But one thing I will say to the president's credit, he was probably the prime mover who got people to vote in historic numbers. So we got to give him credit for that he got people voting. But that's
Something good comes out of everything. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and we know,
Awesome.
and we know that all things work together for good. So, and I'm
Yes, for
not,
the good of God, but those who love him. Yes, indeed.
so
Well,
I'm in good company tonight, with these in conversation with these proclaimers. So just fire away.
well, here comes a big one. How can you be an anti-racist? I think this author does a great job in chatting about that. And one of the big conversations in this particular chapter that focuses on Black people. Can we say that we are powerless? Can we use a defense that we don't have power? So therefore, if you're powerless and you don't have power, are you really saying that you can't be a racist? And I think that's a big conversation throughout the whole chapter. And he defines it this way: powerless defense, the illusory, concealing, disempowering, and racist idea that Black people cannot be racist because Black people don't have power. So that's a big chat right now. And I guess we got to figure out, what do you think after you read this particular chapter? Do
Well,
you need to have power?
let me preface my response with uh, a position of mine um, as it relates to books. First thing I told, and I used to say this in classrooms at the university, first thing, you do not have to believe everything that somebody writes in a book. Secondly, you don't have to agree with everything that a person puts in a book.
Yeah.
One other thing that I learned from Dr. Benjamin Mays, he said that a learner should be like a dry sponge. When you immerse a dry sponge into a liquid, you don't get all of the liquid in the sponge. You have to wring the sponge out and it will retain some moisture. And he said that you have to be like a dry sponge. You don't have to take it all, but you hold on to what has benefit to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
When I saw the title of the book, first thing I want to say, when you asked the question, how to be an anti-racist, well, I said, if you love God, there is no way you can be an anti-racist. You have to understand that there's only one race, and that's the human race. And it was out of one blood that God made all people to dwell on the planet. So I had a little concern about the idea of becoming an anti-racist. I was raised to accept that people, that there's no only one. I was raised to believe that there's only one race, but there are different ethnicities, and people are entitled to believe and behave as they please, and it would be to their benefit to obey the law, because there are consequences to not obeying the law. Secondly, in responding to black people having power or no power or powerless, for me, that's kind of a generalization that I can't embrace. Look, now we are not what we were as a people, and we're not what we're going to be as a people. But to discount that in America there are a couple of billionaires who are black, we have presence in every part of the society, in my opinion.
Yes.
Every
Yes,
part of
that's true.
every part of the society. And there are some statistics out there that are interesting that relate to Black people. There's somebody much smarter than me contends that at a certain age, young Black boys will be influenced to make life choices that will either have them in prison or dead. They say one out of three. See, I don't gravitate toward negativity. So it's true, we might lose one out of three, but if the math makes sense, 2 out of the 3 gonna succeed.
All right, so, that's how you look at it. Okay.
So to say that yes. black people are powerless, I can't agree with it. I can't. I can't wrap my head around it.
And I think that's what the author is saying. I want to go back and just clarify. So what I think I heard you say is that in terms of the notion of anti-racist, what you don't like about the term is that you've always thought of the human race as that we are part of one race with a lot of just different groups or groupings. And so therefore, the way you sort of see the term anti-racist would be that you're anti-human.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got it. Yes. And you're so right. There's so many people in all parts of society with the ability to eliminate or to restructure or process their decision making in such a way they can impact whether or not racism continues within their span. And a lot of people, I think, are going along with the author on that. I mean, it's like a police officer really can decide what action they're going to take with all the training and equipment. They can take a minute or a hot second or decide before they start their evening or their route or whatever you call it, and decide, how am I going to function that I can be an anti-racist or part of the human race or a racist, depending upon what that training is and what decisions they make. So we do have power regardless of the color of the skin, and especially Black people have that decision-making power.
Okay. Well, I guess I said something. I don't know.
Well, I like the way the author says there are a lot of policymakers. There are a lot of congressmen and women since the very beginning of the 17th century. And surely they've had the power to decide on laws. I mean, they may not have had the winning vote, but they had power. They were elected, they got into those positions, and they participated in the process. And so there is power, even if your numbers are low or you don't get exactly what you want when you're voting. So I think you did hit upon something indeed, Derek. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's an ongoing discussion, though, in the entirety of our society, which I think is something that, as you talk about Dr. King, that Stacey Abrams really brought to the forefront. And that is recognizing that I think for so long, so many people, even especially young people, felt like they're powerless and their vote doesn't count. And, you know, I know young people get discouraged when they vote and their person doesn't win. And then you feel like, how did my voice count? And yet, you know, she really focused on getting people registered to vote and to understand how you participate in the process. And participating in the process, I think, is what gives you that power. Just as you said, Pastor Sheila, even if you don't win, or your candidate doesn't win, or your vote doesn't win, we record all of those voices just in our Supreme Court. I mean, for all of us, there are likely Supreme Court decisions we absolutely don't agree with, and some that we do agree with. But also the beauty of at least the Supreme Court is both the majority and the minority opinions are recorded, and sometimes they get used later on in further discussions or legal action. So that minority voice is important, you know. But I really think in this election, what Stacey Abrams did was get in there and explain why this is important. I think so often our politicians talk above everybody's heads and use all this speak that half of us don't know what it is. And yet she could get in there and say, this is why it's important. This is why you stepping up and using your voice and your vote matters.
Well, one of the things that I tried to do in the classrooms, and I still take advantage of teachable moments as I perceive them. Semantics are something that I tried to get students to pay attention to. A person who, well, first thing, my grandfather was my father in some regard, because my daddy died at age 39. One thing my grandfather used to say when people would come to Ebenezer who was seeking an elected office, first of all, he would ask them a question. He'd ask them, where you go to church? And if they hesitated, stumbled, or stuttered, he'd say, well, I don't try to tell the congregation who to vote for, but I do tell them they need to vote for somebody who's on God's side. Because if you put a devil in authority, you ain't gonna do nothing but catch hell. So,
woo, I love it.
So at some point we move from electing people who will serve us. We used to use the term people who are elected to office are public servants.
Yes.
Now they are politicians. They used to be elected to pass humane and create humane laws. Now they create policies that if there's a majority who will benefit from it, there's a minority who won't. So,
yes.
So we got to do some work on the intent and even examine the character of people who we put in office.
Yes.
So wherever and whenever I get a chance to try to focus people, just like with policemen, people who wear the badge and carry the gun. Many years ago, back in especially Texas, who had the celebrated Texas lawman, law people, but they were proud to say that they were peace officers.
Okay.
They were peace officers. See, now many people who wear the badge and carry the gun, when they respond to a scene, they're not coming to restore the peace. They're coming to enforce the law.
Amen. Yeah.
And everybody who gets arrested, some people don't need to be arrested. They need to have some firm conversation and some redirecting. But then there's the business side of law enforcement. When people get arrested, the arresting agency is gonna get some money. The more people you lock up, the more money you make. So. So.
I'm intrigued by the rhetoric and the semantics, especially between this notion that, as you said, we call our elected officials no longer public servants, of which they are, because they are there at the will of the people.
Yeah.
But we talk about we call them politicians, which does that elevate them? Does it not? I don't know. And certainly this enforcing the law versus am I coming to make peace? Thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay.
But one thing the author said very clearly, no matter who you are and what role you play in a community, every person does have the power to either protest, advance, or stall a racist or anti-racist policy. So the power is with that person. If they can have all kinds of job titles, but wherever your setting is, you have that ability to say, I'm not executing this. I'm not expanding this. I'm not letting this grow any further. So if you don't shut it down, you haven't executed the power that you have. I mean, you haven't used the power you have.
Right. And I use a lot of adage, metaphor. Like I asked, young people gave us a phraseology. It was in the form of a question they'd ask, are you in it to win it?
Okay.
Are you in it to win it? So if you are in it to win it, you can't win sitting in the bleachers. You got to get on the field and play. So,
yes.
And what Stacey Abrams convinced people to do was get out of the bleachers, get out of the bleachers and get on the field and play. And your contribution to the game is to vote choice. That's to convince people to do. Get in the game and don't quit. So, and
so would you say that what Stacey Abrams did in getting people to get out of the bleachers, does that go along with what you preach and teach about creating social change, utilizing nonviolent tactics and strategies?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. See, nonviolence, as I teach people, nonviolence is a means. It's not an end. In teaching nonviolence, so let me say this. One of the things that Dr. King did was he took the principles of Jesus and put them into a philosophical package. He was smart enough and gifted enough to know and he was a Baptist, a Christian in every sense of the word, but he was gifted enough to know how to draw people into a place of commitment for the purpose of reaching an end. Jesus talked about the kingdom of heaven. Dr. King talked about the beloved community.
Yes.
And Jesus was a practitioner of nonviolence. If they strike you on one cheek, turn the other one. Dr. King talked about passive resistance. So what we got to get people to buy into is just as there is only one race. Ultimately, Dr. King taught us that there's only one community. And he said it this way, until we learn to live together as brothers and sisters, we run the risk of dying together as fools. Yeah. Wherever I go, I'm going to see you. And wherever you go, you're going to see me. So, and we got to, one other thing, and when it talks about race, now I'm passionate to be more involved with my kind, the kind of people that look like me, but I'm not going to be influenced by the myth that I'm inferior to folks who don't look like me. And on one hand, I'm superior to folks who don't look like me. One thing we have to understand, going back to race, if I need God forbid, if I need a organ transplant, I'm not gonna say to my surgeon, doctor, if you're gonna give me a heart, you say I need another heart. Well, I want a black heart. I want you to find who's black and get the heart from them. No, doc, I want you to find a heart that's gonna work.
Yes, yes. There you go. That's the real deal.
Yeah, I don't care where it comes from. Just make sure you got one that's gonna be compatible with my body. So.
Yes, yeah. So true. So we sometimes lose sight of what the real issue is. And I think that's just a perfect example of what really works for me, where my body won't reject it and I can continue to live is what's important. And everybody wants to live. And so we have to get to the point that we understand as one race, one community. And yeah, you can be within your own family or your own grouping, but it doesn't mean that we don't love one another and take care of one another and look out for one another as we're supposed to do. So true. Yeah. Well.
And I'm not some hopeless romantic. The scriptures are very clear to me. If we see, it's one that I'm very passionate about. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not to your own understanding, and all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. See, at one time I thought I had some pretty good ideas that clashed with God's ideas. And I've learned that he's got a whole lot more sense. He is perfect. I'm imperfect, so I just trust God. That's the end. So.
That's true.
And that may be because you are open to hearing from God. And maybe part of the problem is when we look at the whole of humanity, how many people have closed themselves off from hearing God in whatever way they could hear God?
Well, we're assuming that they know God, and that's another issue too, is that our conversation is between three people who know and recognize God, but we have to also put that other sentence in that some people really do not know God. The exposure with the decrease in people participating in worship of any kind is very evident, and it shows up in our society a lot.
Well, I'm going to step out the boat on this one. Primarily, first, I'm a child of God. Secondly, I have chosen to follow the teachings of Jesus. But what is happening in the Protestant world, that we are not giving people good imaging of God. We're not. Christianity over, especially in Africa and the Caribbean, is much different than it is over here in America. That's just a statement of fact. And we have, to me, we have two elements of the faith community on this call. Right now, it's a conversation between the sanctuary and the synagogue.
Yeah.
Come on, bring it. Yes, sir.
It's a conversation between the sanctuary and the synagogue that I wished we've got to do better with having more conversations with the sanctuary, the synagogue, and the mosque.
And the mosque. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So true.
Although those conversations are happening.
Oh, they are. They are. Oh, I'm not saying that.
Absolutely.
Oh, they are. And that's the only way we're going to succeed, in my opinion. The only way we're going to create community is for agents who represent three major communities in our society. We got to have more conversation. We got to. So thank you, ladies, for doing this.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely. I'd be curious to know, at least from the Protestant perspective, when you talk about differences between Christianity here and then, let's say, in Africa, what are those major differences and how people, I guess, maybe interact or see the world?
Well, I can say this, where I think we are on this side of the globe, where we fall into a position of deficiency. We don't talk spirituality much. And I'm put it like this: a teacher did teach that God is spirit.
Oh, yes.
Those who worship him in spirit and in truth.
Yes.
African Christianity is very spiritual. It's much more disciplined than Christianity over here, Protestantism over here. We don't teach very much about sin. Now it's, in a lot of congregations, it's turn to the person to your left, to your right, give them a high five and tell them the money is on the way.
Do you think, though, that, because I'm going to say that I think I'm wondering if that's an American ideology, because I would agree with you in terms of some aspects of Judaism as well. I think that in America, as an American religious community, and based on what you're telling me and when I think about the synagogue, I do think you're right. I think sometimes that spirituality or whatever it is that allows us as individuals to experience and connect with God or to see ourselves as children of God isn't always there. It's more of I'm coming, give it to me. It's transactional. As you said, high five, and then we turn around and we go out the doors. And I wonder, is that something that's inherently part of the American culture, as opposed, or what it means to ultimately become American, as opposed to having to do with any of our religions? And then maybe deep down, as we talk about everybody is one people, maybe that means we Americans, wholly all of us, have a hot mess of work to do.
Oh, absolutely. Now,
you know what, Derek? I want you to make sure you mention the people that don't want to wear a mask. I think that's part of the culture issue too. We make it what we want it to be. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, one of the things I think, well, Rabbi, I want to share this with you, and then I'm gonna come and try to tie something all together. One of the courses I taught was world religion. The five that the Office of Academic Affairs wanted to try to give students a perspective on: Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So I had to immerse myself in becoming as educated about those five faiths as possible. And I see purpose. I've gained information that has caused my life to be what it is in terms of its discipline. There is a spirit of seduction that hangs over America. America can influence people to engage in behaviors that are ultimately ungodly. They will get people to compromise their integrity. So one of the things that we lack in America is spiritual discipline, not just the rules of our religion and our faith, but spiritual discipline. When I taught, and what I did was made the courses, the world religion course, I called it, made it interactive. I brought a cleric from each faith. So I brought the rabbi in, and the rabbi started sharing. He said, well, my daughter is a teenager now, and we took her out of the Jewish school and put her in public school. So she made some friends, and her friends used to like to go to Applebee's. So my daughter kept coming to me and saying, Daddy, I know the law. You made sure I know the law. But I like shrimp now. Rabbi, you listening?
I'm listening.
Daddy, I like shrimp now.
Oh, yuck.
So, and Rabbi said, well, she would just come home and keep talking about these shrimp, and I'm trying to stand my ground with the law. And now I'm getting ready to tell y'all something, so don't you go back to the congregation and tell them what I done told you, what I'm getting ready to tell you.
Okay.
He said, well, she just kept working on me about these shrimp, and I got to tell you, I like them now myself. So
there we go. There goes the law.
So here in America, unless you are spiritually grounded, you can be seduced into behaviors that are not of God. You got to be strong. Now, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I can tell this audience that certainly I'm not what I'm going to be. I'm not, in some regard, I'm not what I ought to be, but I sure can tell you I'm not what I used to be. I'm still working.
Amen.
I'm still a work
Right.
in progress. I'm still a work in progress. And some see, and here the rabbi is, and I'm not casting judgment on him, but he wanted to use the urging of his daughter to be the excuse or explanation for his disobedience.
It's an interesting way to think about that.
Yeah.
No,
There's called what's that, power of suggestion or planting a seed. Sometimes the devil, I call it the devil, can get inside of you. I can't stand not having my chocolate. So don't start me with a piece of chocolate on TV. I'm ready to go get a piece of chocolate. I got it. Yeah.
But that power of influence and persuasion can go both ways. You know, sometimes a child can find God in a way that parents didn't help them find God, and they go all in and therefore bring the rest of their family with them. Sometimes that way.
Absolutely. See, one of the things that God showed me when I talk spirituality, babies are very spiritual. Sometimes in their infancy, they can't talk, they can't walk, but sometimes you can look into a child's eyes and they seeing something. They are seeing something. Then as they get a little older and get a relationship with that friend that can't nobody see but them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Come on.
who you talking to?
Uh-oh.
And they'll tell us.
Uh-oh.
And then we'll turn around and tell them, oh, no, there's nobody in here but you. So you need to leave that imaginary friends. No, this is this is real. So whatever you seeing, but we don't realize that they could be talking to an angel.
Oh.
You're right. You're right.
Okay. Okay.
I can think of plenty of stories that I know of toddlers and preschoolers who ask questions that would, blow parents' minds. I can remember, even one of my own kids one time telling me that God was in the living room, and I was like, oh, okay, tell me about God being in the living room, and I got a full description of, God on a cloud and what was going on in the living room. So I think you're right. I don't discount that spirituality of babies and young kids before, as you're saying, that influence. And what is that influence that we have here, in the United States that maybe sometimes takes us outside of that realm of belief and spirituality?
Now, and when you put a bunch of babies together of what we want to say, I say different ethnicities. I'm not going to say different races, different ethnicities. They get along. They get along.
That's right. They have no reason not to. They don't understand what we want to teach them.
Hate is not genetic. They are taught. They're taught to hate. They're taught to be prejudiced. They're taught to be biased.
100%.
Teaching and programming. Yeah. But that spirit of seduction takes me to all of the crazy things that we're bombarded with every day. I mean, the marketing and advertising in this world is phenomenal. I'm sure it's billions and billions of dollars connected to it, but just think, you can have it your way. And they're talking about a sandwich, or just do it. It's like, they're talking about athletic shoes. I mean, just the way we get hit with those messages, they're very seductive because it's a hint. You know what I mean?
Well, let me ask, I'm going to ask you, Pastor and Rabbi, it's the same question, but the sacred text of Christianity is the Bible. You got, as they said, tried to convince people that you got on the Jewish side, you got the Torah, you got the writings of the prophets, how they threw the Old Testament together. But whatever text, whichever text is on the Jewish side and pastor on the Christian side, are those texts a buffet? Are they a buffet?
Meaning that you can pick and choose?
Yeah, you pick and choose what. See, I was raised that whatever they put on the plate, you got to eat it all.
I was raised that way too.
I got you.
The sacred text of Judaism, it's not a smorgasbord. It's not a buffet. You got to eat it all. On Christianity.
Right, and in Judaism, in order to understand the next text and the next text and the next text, you have to first know the basic concepts before if you don't know the Torah, then you don't understand the writings and you don't understand the Talmud and so on. You are right. It is.
Same thing with New Testament, because the Old Testament will teach you a lot, but if you haven't gone through the Old Testament, when you get to the New Testament, the references don't make sense. So you're right. There's an order. That's what you're getting. It's an order to life.
Which is interesting because I've met many a Christian before who've been in our services. And I think I've shared this with you before, Pastor, when somebody will come up to me after a bar mitzvah and say, I can't believe that the bar mitzvah boy talked about Jesus's teachings. Love your neighbor. I mean, that's Jesus's teaching. And I always stop and I say, you do know that Jesus was a Jew. And that text first showed up in the book of Leviticus, which is where Jesus learned it, and then Jesus taught it. So,
Yeah.
you know what? Why not? Really? Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, since we got here, Rabbi, I want you to answer a couple of things for me.
Okay. Uh-oh.
You will understand this bastion of questions that I got for the Rabbi. Is it 713 or 731 commandments?
613.
I knew it was 30. Okay.
Yeah, you added an extra 100 there. 613.
One of them, a lot of Protestants have been taught that there are only 10.
Yeah, the 10 Commandments.
But for Judaism, which we borrowed the 10 from, there's 613.
Yes.
I try to get people to understand. And the first commandment was not either Lord your God is a jealous God, thou shalt have no other gods before me. That wasn't the first commandment. I tell people the first commandment was don't mess with those trees. That was the first one.
Actually, I'm going to correct you. The very first commandment is be fruitful and multiply.
Okay.
That was the first one. And then afterwards, they're told not to mess with the trees.
Okay.
Yep.
But we go all the way back to the Garden of Eden for the first
100%. We go back to the Garden of Eden.
For the commandment. So
yep.
Fruitful and multiply, and then don't mess with the trees. But see,
exactly.
Christians, a lot of Christians think that it started with what I said. So
right.
we got so much to learn. And,
you know what? Even there are Jews who think that the 10 Commandments are the first 10, and we always have to say, nope. There are quite a number that come before we get to those. So they're not even the most important. So
that has a lot to do with how the world presents. People see so many movies and so many poor ways in which to learn about religion. And it's sad, but I think about the Charleston Heston and all the movies where children in my community think the 10 Commandments are 10, and they can say all 10. And I'm thinking, that's not the beginning or the end. I don't even know where they got these. Where did they get this from? Movies? Warner Brothers?
Well, on that subject, I say to students, you all look. Israel didn't cross the Red Sea in 2 minutes.
No.
Like it's shown on the 10 Commandments. It took a while.
And then after they did cross, it took 40 years till they got where they were going, because there was a whole lot of stuff that had to happen before they got there. They got in their own way.
Yeah, and then the other thing, Pharaoh didn't leave 12 hours after they left.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't as cut and dry. Not at all.
So,
but it looks good. It looks good on TV.
Humor is part of who I am. So that's
So we're really talking about what the author went into a great deal of time discussing, making sure you don't accept mind control, that you have power. When people tell you you don't, you'll end up stop resisting. And that thing that Stacey Abrams did is exactly that. People say, oh, voter a fraud or whatever the language is. But you know what? She was saying no such thing. Get out there and vote. So we have to push past what people lay in front of us and pretend that's the way you're going to think when you see trouble, because I've already given you the answer before you ask the question. And so I love this conversation because we have opened up a great conversation about what the world teaches, and we need to step out of the world because we're not always in the world and we're not supposed to be.
And see, I try to get people to understand that first, we are better when we're together.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that one.
And some see bad news. Bad news is what sells newspapers, which attracts a lot of people's interest in the news. But I try to
Yes.
I try to get people to focus on what we have in common. If we focus more on what we have in common and less on what divides us, we can start making some positive. We can start making some positive progress. So, cause there's negative progress too. So,
Absolutely. And I think at the heart of this book, that's what Ibram X. Kendi, that's what Dr. Kendi is talking about in terms of if you go with a outside of your definition, Dr. King, of an anti-racist, when he talks about working toward that humanity that you're talking about, I think one of the beautiful things in this book is that he talks from his perspective and the education that he himself has to have about all these various, subtopics and subgroups. And he puts forward his own vulnerability in this book to help us recognize how to break down those barriers. We've talked about Black, we've talked about white. In this book, he talks about what are the gender barriers, what are the sexuality barriers, any sort of barriers that we all put in there because we just make assumptions, or we just don't know, or we've let somebody else tell us that that's what this is, as opposed to us getting in and learning and experiencing for ourselves.
well, I'm a very audacious person. I people come to me sometimes and say, I need you to help me think through something. Well, my first response is, how much have you thought about it first? I say, I would like for you to come to me with some positions, because if this is something you're dealing with and you want me to think it through, then we're gonna have a problem. Because see, if I come up with a solution and tell you to do it, and you turn around and do it your way and it don't work, that's on you. But if I tell you how to do it and you do it like I said, then that's on me. So
you gotta own it. That's right. Yeah. So true.
So why don't you start trying to think first? Because your brain works if you use it. I mean, it really does. So
So true. So true.
So well, I hope I've said some good stuff so far. I don't know.
Oh, it's been wonderful to be with you.
Absolutely awesome. It's enjoyable to have this moment with you. So let's talk about the N-word. Did we cover that pretty much, that conversation that the author had about using words that actually ends up, in his opinion, to be more like Black on Black crime? And he does admit that every ethnic group has their phrases and conversations that are within the family, so to speak, and how negative it can be. And I'm almost glad that we have talked about seductive, that we've moved that seductive cloud away from those words and trying to make them so exciting and laughable and jokes when they're not. What's your opinion on that?
Well, first of all, again, seduction, one of the things that we have got to go back to across the board is raising children. Like I tell people, I was raised. I grew up in America at the time. I grew up in segregation. I was born into segregation. I saw the colored and white signs hanging all over the South. We've legislated them away. We won't see them anymore. But when I was growing up, and see, I have no problem with saying the word nigger. I have no problem. But when I was growing up, there was nothing endearing about the word. It was offensive. Now our children have made it a term of endearment, and we've allowed them.
Yeah.
What's up, my nigga? No, it's a term of endearment. Now, the other thing, again, we have been seduced to go to a place of passivity. Some words, and I just say it like it is. Some people, when I'm preaching and say stuff like it is, it's like when I was growing up, there was nothing endearing or the other word I just used it endearing, but and calling each other females, calling each other bitches and hoes. It's endearing now. And those of us who know that those words were connoted as offensive, we just kind of sit back and say, well, oh, that's just how they are. I got a 35-year-old and a 31-year-old son, two of them. There's nothing offensive and racial in their vocabularies. They don't. They don't talk. They don't use those words as something endearing, something. I had another word, but we've compromised the offensiveness of certain words, and then and like I say, I was raised. We got to go back to raising shit.
So what are you suggesting is that in our society today, it's some of this may be the fault of parents that we have not, or whichever generation, we're not raising our kids in the way that a generation once was, where parents said, or that generation said, no way, we're not using those words. And you put your, there's a consequence for using those words.
Yeah, see now you got parents who will call their children, use the N word, the B word, talk to their children like that. So that's
that seductive you were talking about. Yeah,
we've been seduced, compromised.
Yeah, like it's okay. And you know what the author of the book said? When we're guilty of reproducing words and mentality that's offensive, then we're part of the problem. We're not solving anything. And so, absolutely. I mean, the entertainment world just thought it was the funniest thing. I mean, Chris Rock made a lot of great entertaining moments with that kind of language. And he said when he looked at the audience and saw white people laughing harder than blacks, he realized he was doing the wrong thing. But so many times we're just involved in losing our integrity. We want to go for the money and the ratings, and everybody's laughing, so I'm a great person. And he found out it was the most pathetic thing he could have done. Yeah.
And you said all of that, he was, his ratings and everything, he was making money too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He was making money off of those degrading routines, and I'm glad he saw the light.
Yeah. And before we started, Rabbi said one thing that was true. Now, you and I might be able to say things to one another that, wow, if she walked in the room and used that word, we would both be so offended. So, it makes no sense to think that.
Right, in terms of those words of, as you said, words of endearing or endearment.
That's right.
Right. I feel like we could have an entire conversation separate about this notion that Dr. King is saying about raising kids. Because as you're talking about it, I'm imagining, there are so many things that I never would have said or done in front of my parents. Like, you just did not do that. Or I think about when we used to walk into our grandparents' house, and always on the wall, we knew that wooden spoon was there just in case you mouthed off or acted up, you knew that switch or the spoon was there. So
Oh
we
my
live in,
goodness.
And
They
Rabbi,
might grab you without the switch.
Rabbi,
Did
help
you?
me with this. Isn't it, uh, uh, isn't it written somewhere about to spare the rod is to spoil the child? And,
yes,
Oh, yeah.
what is that in Proverbs, I believe?
I believe
Yeah.
so. Yes.
also, it's written that God will chastise who He loves. So, uh,
Mhm.
so, and like I try to teach people, there's a difference between discipline and abuse.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
9 out of the 10 whippings I got, I deserved them.
It's that question
We
of
can
do we
say
live
that
in that
now.
world anymore?
But sometimes in order to go forward, you got to go back.
Oh, yeah.
That would be an
Yeah.
entirely interesting conversation.
I'll have to
See,
do a part 2 because I think our part 1 is kind of winding down, but this has been absolutely fantastic to have you here today. Thank
well,
you
my
so much
pleasure.
for being with us. And
Yes.
My Diversity will have this posted on its website, www.mydiversitycircle.com. And perhaps we'll have a part 2. We probably need to. I haven't had enough of Derek yet, Brigitte. I haven't. This is
No, I
awesome.
think it's great. And I just want to say to, we had a conversation earlier this morning. So I want to say to anybody from United Hebrew that is watching that I got to show the red chair on camera to Dr. King.
Yeah.
He got, Pastor Sheila told him about our red chair and how his uncle took a long nap in it. And I shared the lore and showed a picture of that chair. So we talked about, these circles of connection. So we've now connected that red chair back to the King family, which I think is fantastic.
Well, can I say one thing in part? And one thing that a current thread that ran through the conversation was modestly mentioned, talking obedience, discipline. For everybody who should benefit from this, there are some people out there who are trying to keep our country safe. As we reflect on Veterans Day, keep our country safe, keep us healthy, take the pandemic serious.
Yes.
Keep that mask on because you're helping yourself stay healthy and you're helping keep us safe and healthy. For those who are in active military service, we thank you. For those who have retired, we thank you.
Thank you. Yes, indeed.
But keep the mask on. Keep the mask.
Please.
And yes, we'll echo your sentiments. Thank you to all of those veterans who served, and thank you to those in the active military. Even though it's Veterans Day, we thank you as well for keeping all of us safe and helping to uphold the ideals of this great country that we live in. We have a lot of work to do to make it greater.
Thank you so much, Derek King Sr. Thank you so much. God bless you. Keep it going and be safe. We'll see you again.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing this time with us. We appreciate it.
Peace and shalom.
Yes, shalom and peace. All right.